I'll wait till Adrian attaches his microphone, so. Got it? All right. Let's call the meeting to order. Anybody want to set the agenda?
I will move to set the agenda with the amendment that we move item 4, update on code enforcement actions at Woodlawn, to number 1, and move the other 3 items down 1.
Sure. Fine.
I
Anybody?
will second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, let's go. First item on the agenda is update on code enforcement actions at Woodlawn Industrial Park.
Thank you, Mayor. So we had a lot of activity at the Woodlawn Industrial Park, also known as the River West Business Park on Woodlawn. Last week, we've had complaints, and Councilman Seelinger mentioned one about mud and debris on the streets at last week's council meeting. And I gave a report on what we were doing, working with DOT, Gaston County, and NCDEQ on those matters. Those seem to have been resolved. They've cleaned that up. Mm-hmm. And then last week we got some complaints about nighttime construction activities, and I reported that to you in my email report to you on Friday, and then there was some conversation over email over the weekend. So I wanted to give you an update on what the ordinance says, what we're doing, what authority we have to address the situation. So we've asked the staff to come and give you an update on what all we're doing. So we want to give that to you and answer any questions that you may have about what's going on out there and what we're doing to address it. As background, you approved the rezoning for almost 600,000, well, a little over 600,000 square feet of office, industrial, warehousing space on Woodlawn in 2019. Construction started earlier this year. They've been doing grading, they've been doing clearing, they've been doing utility work. And as I said last week, construction's messy, it's noisy, but there is an expectation that it's not going to be terribly impactful throughout the evening and throughout the day. I think from the comments we've received from the neighbors of the site, they understand there's going to be a certain amount of inconvenience and a certain amount of stuff they just have to put up with during construction. But it's a little bit different when it's overnight and they're trying to sleep and get ready for their day. So we certainly understand their concerns.
Yeah.
And I think the big issue centered on, welcome.
Yeah.
Sorry. You're fine.
Made it in, huh?
Straight from the Steelers.
You're doing
game.
great. We just got started. So we're starting on the Woodlawn update and then going down from that. So the issue really last week was about the pouring of the big concrete pads in the either late evening hours or early morning hours, depending on your perspective. So to give you kind of an update of what's going on and why, I'd like for our city inspector, Gary Gallagher, to come up and just, he's on site every day and he's talking to the contractors and he's been on them. And then he can tell you what's going on out there. And then we've got code enforcement with Lindsay Yeager, can tell you about the code enforcement complaints and what she's doing, what she's responded to out there. And then we've got Lindsay's supervisor, Arthur Poland, and Chief Hawkins here as well to answer any other questions about the ordinance.
Yeah.
The Woodlawn site force is 820 cubic yards that continues on. We have a 12-hour work window. It takes 18 to 19 hours to make one of these pours. By the time the concrete gets there, by the time they get it out, get it down, depending on heat, heat's a big factor. They are working tonight is their last pour. If you look at your handout, you'll see the dates on there of the nights that was poured, or that we have poured.
It's yours, yeah.
If you look at the one tonight, it's one of the biggest pours of the whole slab. There were 3 of them. It's the furthest from the community distance-wise, but it's on the same site. I mean, so that's That's where we are on this. There's no possible way that they can get 820 yards of concrete on this job site within a 13 to 14 hour window. And that's not removing or finishing anything and getting it ready. So that's where we stand on the pours.
So what you're saying, Gary, is that because of the amount of concrete that we have to pour, that's what's taking so long to do that? That's why
That's
it's
correct.
extending?
That's
Okay.
correct. They're batching it as fast as they can batch it, and they're bringing it as fast as they can bring it. It's 82 to 84 trucks by an hour around is what it is. That's about the best that
Wow.
they can do in a perfect world.
I know some of the people in the neighborhood were talking about the lights being
That's
on
correct.
real late.
That's correct. We went over, me and Lindsay, we had a meeting with them on site. We got the lights turned around. We got everything cleaned up, shining back towards Woodlawn like it's supposed to be. So like I said, tonight will be their last pour for the west pad.
When is the east pad? I mean, I know that's further away from the neighborhood. Is there any?
That is in planning's hands. I don't know, the grading, hadn't took place yet, so that permit has not been issued.
And is that the smaller office
It's
building?
150,000 square foot less than what you're looking at.
But it would still entail some of the same issues.
That's correct.
Right.
Is there a reason they can't do smaller pours that would take, I mean, I know they'd have to do more of them, but if we've got a 12-hour
Well,
workday,
what you're looking at was a 9-day pour. If we cut those pours down, it would be a 28-day pour.
but then they wouldn't have to work at night.
Well, they would still have to work at night because you can't do it in 12 hours.
So what you're saying, Gary, because I've been involved with concrete before 2 years ago, but it sets if you don't pour the whole thing.
That's
So you
correct.
got to be careful.
And concrete bills heat sitting in a truck turning.
Yeah.
So if it gets too hot, they won't let them pour.
Yeah.
They won't let them pour. They'll reject the load and send it back.
Okay. Makes sense.
Were we aware of this ahead of time? That wouldn't their construction manager know that it was gonna be outside of the work window?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, if you know it's going to take 18 hours and you know that we've got a 12-hour work window, I mean, none of that should be surprising.
well, we haven't had any jobs here that was big pours that didn't go just like this one's going.
Were they within 1,000 feet of residence, those
They
other
were.
pours? They were.
The
So-
Harris Teeter,
Mhm.
Belmont Middle School,
Those went into the night like this?
that's correct.
Yes. We got some complaints about the Belmont Middle School pour when they did that. I don't remember us getting any complaints about the Harris Teeter.
We
And
did
they're,
not have no complaints.
the hospital is also doing this. So it's,
That's because they knew they were getting a grocery store.
well, we got plenty of complaints about Harris Teeter, just not about the overnight concrete pour.
I mean, with the middle school, I mean, I don't know if we learned any lessons from that or not, because that abuts some neighborhoods also. I know we got problems with construction traffic that we had to mitigate. But I mean, again, we have an ordinance that says you can pour during these hours. I mean, maybe we need to look into some kind of special permitting if they're gonna wanna go beyond that and condition that somehow, because the exercise of common sense doesn't seem to have taken place here by these guys. They pointed these high-intensity lights right at the houses. They've got the beepers on their truck when they back up. I mean, I know they can be disconnected.
So they can't get
no,
constant
that's-
regulation.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I know they can be, but I mean, it's
But it would
also
be
covered
illegal.
by insurance and OSHA. You've got gates slamming on trucks. I mean, you know, they have to keep in mind, you know, we got to pour the concrete, but we're also right next to a residential neighborhood. I mean, so we got to figure out how we're going to do this in the future.
Well, I do agree with both of your comments, because as the ordinance is written, you either comply with the ordinance or you build your large foundation. It's like you can't, they're mutually exclusive. So there has to be some sort of process by which you get a waiver or a permit, because
Right.
otherwise it's, you know, it sounds like they physically cannot do it and comply with the ordinance at the same time. And so that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And obviously, well, I don't know whether they were aware of the ordinance or not, but if that's what the ordinance says, then, and they're in violation of it, there needs to be some sort of process. If you're saying that it's a physical impossibility to comply with the ordinance and pour the concrete in a building like this, there has to be some mechanism to get a waiver or special permit, and that might include perhaps like notice to surrounding residences or whatnot.
I think the whole thing, Gary, is that they had asked beforehand what they were going to be entailing with this project. Then I think we'd have been okay with that if we understood what was going on. I think it was all done.
I kind of characterize shining giant bright
Yeah.
lights at houses as pretty thoughtless, in my opinion. But
just piggyback on what he said, just a little bit of the impact that we have to think about. Obviously, our ordinance is written probably not for a situation like this. I think the special permit is something that we have to think about. The lights and all those issues. The problem is that is a management and oversight situation where the people who set this up did not anticipate that these concrete trucks are going to come in and do this, because a lot of times maybe your engineer or whoever's not on site.
Yeah.
We dealt with this at the Belmont Middle School. So we worked through and we got some things done. I've been here almost 5 years and been over code for it. This is only the second time in 5 years that I've dealt with this. So I don't think this is like this big reoccurring issue. It's something we have to address. But something else, when the council is considering this, you have to take into consideration how many trucks come in
84
during the
days.
school. I don't think at 8 o'clock in the a.m. in the morning that we need 80-something trucks lined up on our streets either, because I know when they were doing the Belmont Tour, it was truck after truck after truck. I can only imagine if that was during just solid work hours. So your complaints are going to transfer from the neighbors to the traffic and having everything at a grid line. Because there's no way to get 80 trucks off the street. And they're one after another. They have to be there and back in. As soon as one pulls out, another one backs in. So I just want us to go in this with a very open mind when we're looking at ordinances and what we're going to do, because when we fix one problem, we're going to create another. Because I cannot believe the amount of trucks at the Belmont Middle School. And I think in one night we had like 40 trucks coming up and down Keener and Park and going on South Point Road. Now, if you can imagine all that focused in that one area in Woodlawn, we just about shut half the city down over there. And so, because there's nowhere to get them off the road. So, and I don't know, I'm not defending what they're doing, and I'm not minimizing what's happening with the residents, but I think we have to be reasonable when we approve such a large construction project. We have to understand that there's ways it has to get done. And now, I can tell you, with the shortage of manpower and the shortage of product, that's an issue as well. I dealt with that. I just had a cold concrete area poured on the side of my house, and it was a fiasco getting concrete in there. And getting it coordinated for them to make it and to get it to my house. So I have a personal experience with it. So Lindsay's going to describe more about what we've done, but I just want to talk about that before we really get deep into how we change this, to think about the impact of having all that equipment during the day. So then our complaints are going to shift, the danger of getting people, and especially if it's school time. So I just wanted to put that out there to think about as well before we really get deep into the.
Yeah, I think in the future, Chief and Gary, what we can do is have a situation where we inform the neighbors of what's going on because of the project. I think if they're aware of this and knowing it's coming, then I think they'll be a lot better receptive to it.
Well, I think also, when this was approved, no one here has worked with concrete, I don't believe, to that extent. So we don't know what their pour schedule is. So, I mean, those are the kind of things that we're going to have to pull out of people and have them tell us, because, I mean, I'm assuming that they have to be cognizant of our ordinances to some extent. I mean,
Well,
'cause
they're assumed to be cognizant, whether they are or not.
they're assumed to be cognizant. And, I guess the assumption is wrong, because I know at McLean in the Conservancy, we operate under the assumption that they could read the ordinance, that they could understand it, because it was literally one chapter and the next chapter which covered the violation that they did. And, maybe it's easier to seek forgiveness than ask permission, but And I agree, you don't want the trucks on the road. So, I mean, we've got to find our way through this, but in the future, I don't have any expertise on that level of construction. It would have never occurred to me to ask about when are you going to be pouring concrete? How much are you going to be pouring? You know, the assumption is that we have an ordinance and that it's not a suggestion. I mean, it's an ordinance. I mean, we expect everybody else to comply with the ordinances. If you need to work outside of our ordinances, then we need to have a discussion about that.
And that was going to be my question. So obviously that is not feasible to do it inside of the ordinance time. So we obviously have to have those discussions about when you do it.
Absolutely.
And how you do it.
That's a common sense thing.
Is it that they can't do it or just don't want to because it extends the timeline?
No, sir, they could not physically do it.
There's no way they can physically do it.
I mean,
won't
bring
do
in
it.
smaller amounts of
You got
concrete.
You got a 18 or 19-hour working time that they have to work that concrete that's coming in. People work
Yeah.
it. I mean, it's
80
that's
hours.
a lot of concrete, so.
Well, I'm just saying, what if they brought it in smaller portions?
Yeah, like if you did the slabs half the size or something.
I mean, that does extend their timeline, but, I mean, is that feasible? I mean, you work a certain area of concrete, then you work another area of concrete. I mean, the cure time is the same, it's just the size of the slab is smaller.
I'm not a concrete guy.
Gary, I've worked with concrete before, and I'm telling you, it sets quick. If you don't get it in there, you're in trouble.
Well, I know
But-
Belmont Middle School, that's the problem we had is it was during the summer and the
Yeah.
temperature, that they had to do it or
Yeah.
it wouldn't work.
That's
And
right.
then, you know, at that point that they work outside of the ordinance, you know, that's where I guess we've got to get clarification today.
Yeah.
You know, because if I know we talked about, you know, stopping the work, but if you do that, then it can never get finished.
Yep, you got a
because they
problem.
can't comply with that ordinance.
That's,
So
it's a catch-22.
I don't know what the answer
It
is.
is a catch-22. You can
Council,
get informed the neighbors.
We'd like to get more explanation
Yeah.
from the company. I just know this, I've heard it from two different companies building two large, and
Yeah.
they both said the same thing. So I would think if they could do it differently, maybe they would. But it's two separate companies that probably do not even have any kind of association with each other, both saying the same thing about the concrete. You deal with
Yeah.
way more of this than I do.
Most
mean,
important
I'm-
thing is informing the neighbors, letting them know what's going on. And I think you'll solve a lot of the problem.
What was the deal with the lights? Like, could they not have shined them in a different direction?
Absolutely, they could. People come in and do their job. They don't think about how it affects other people. They're there to get their job.
Yeah.
And you have them work with people and, staff. Sometimes they are just looking at getting the job done and not the other stuff. Once it was addressed, they changed it. They changed it. The lights are not shining there anymore.
So is there like a police report for that night when the lights were shining? Nobody called the cops, right?
No, we got this information later. And so, and once we got it, once it's reported, then we addressed it, went out there when they found out, then they tell them, change the light pattern, where you shine it, do all that stuff. And then even like the rocks, and the dirt on Woodlawn, that's a state road. We have absolutely zero control over that, other than we can suggest to the companies, hey, please don't do that, but we have no control to make them clean it up. It's a state maintained road.
Yeah.
But City of Belmont has absolutely zero control over the state. You're all familiar with that.
Yeah.
So that's where we're, everything that we could address, Lindsay, that everybody's addressed this, and to my knowledge, all that stuff has been corrected, other than the fact that they cannot pour within that time. And the other question was, and I even, reading on the social media stuff, is that, we have not done our job. We have done everything inside of the ordinance, physically possible, with the current ordinance that this council approved. Anything we do outside of that at this point is outside of the law and the ordinances of the city.
Yeah.
So when the citizens want us to stop working, we would be in violation of the law ourselves. We cannot do that. So that's
And obviously, any change that was made to the ordinance by the time it took effect, it would be, yes, as a,
Well, are we gonna have this issue when they start like putting up steel and stuff too? I mean,
we did not have this issue at Belmont Middle School. The
No.
only time that I'm aware we had this issue was during the concrete pour, because there's a certain time and temperature of concrete. So that, I didn't have any other complaints that I'm aware of unless there's no other complaints that I'm aware of. You know, we get complaints with. We've gotten complaints before when the state's out working or the city's out working when we're working all night long on a busted water line, bright lights and generators. We're in violation as well. I mean, technically, if you,
It's true.
we've got to consider all that.
True.
And my only reason for it is we've got to consider all of that when we're doing this ordinance. It looks like it might be really good. And just a few months ago, 6 months, we upped the fines for the ordinance violations. But at the same time, you still have to have a due process for people who violate the laws and ordinances. And I just want our citizens to just please understand that in the progress and the things that we do, we don't want to judge people and set rules upon them that, or other people that they can't, that they don't want set on them. You know, I mean, we don't want to go out and enforce rules without giving people due processes and following our own ordinances and laws. I don't think that's fair to anyone. And that's what we're being asked to do in this situation. And I don't like that.
Well, that's a lot of concrete trucks.
I mean, right now we're here, the citizens want us to shut this thing down and all that stuff. And
No,
that's just not anything
Can't do it.
that we can,
Can't
can't
do
do that. We're gonna set the city up for a lot of liability.
Yeah,
And
you're right, absolutely right.
Ordinance now, as Mr. Everett said, I don't know that it.
Right. This is what in constitutional law, what they would call capable of repetition yet evading review.
Exactly.
We want to get, today, we want to get good direction on how we want to look at the ordinances. I just don't think everything fits in a box. And I think the city, we're going to approve major projects. We're going to have to be flexible in how they get done because everything doesn't fit the box.
But that's why I think we need to, at the very least, come up with some sort of special permit or waiver process, because as it's written now, there's literally no way that they can, and I'm not a concrete expert. I know that people come to us sometimes and say, well, there's no way we can possibly do this. And then when push comes to shove and we push back, oh, I guess they can. So I'm willing to, if we can satisfy ourselves that they physically can't pour within the hours in the ordinance, then as the ordinance reads, there is no way that they can do what they need to do, and they either do what they need to do and violate the ordinance or comply with the ordinance and not be able to build their building. So clearly, at a minimum, something needs to be done to establish some sort of process by which if they need to, they can apply to do this. And I think within that, we can perhaps include notification or whatever. But to me, that's at a minimum.
Yeah.
The way it's written now, that needs to be done, because otherwise anyone who does this has to choose between violating the ordinance or not being able to build their building. And, we can talk about, fines or whatever, because obviously I would assume that you've got how many $1 million building versus $150 a day fine, putting moral and everything else aside, I know what most people would choose. And so, that can be another discussion, but, and I think we can be flexible. The permitting avenue would be permit flexibility. I just think at a minimum that's something that needs to be done, because otherwise you're in this catch-22 situation.
When you look at fines as well, you have to think about if you have John who's remodeling a bathroom in his home at 10 o'clock at night, those fines you're assessing to him, same one you're assessing to Evans Construction over here, who's a multi-million-dollar business. I think that's something we really have to take into consideration when we're looking at fines and all that, because I keep hearing, let's just raise these fines up to where it hurts. Well, that's fine until you get into finding John remodeling his bathroom $5,000.
Well, I think you've got to have some delineation between major construction projects and what you're talking about. There has to be, that path has to diverge just a little bit.
But right now, our ordinance is.
Well,
Can you build that into the permit? Like a violation of the permit that results in a fine of?
Well, certainly we can, because the fine, as it is now, there's no fine specified. So because there's no fine specified in the ordinance as written, you go to the general provision, which says anything that doesn't specify what the fine is, it's $150. So we could just specify the fine. Obviously, we'd want to take into consideration some of the things that Chief Hawkins has been talking about. And, you know, I presume there's probably some middle ground between a $150 fine and shutting them down that we could implement that would take these things into consideration and provide due process.
The most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, is communicating with the neighbors and letting them know what's going to be going on. And that's important to do that. As long as they're aware of what's going on and we don't shine lights in their windows, I think we'd be okay.
Mayor, I think you're absolutely correct. Just like when we were going to shut down a road for a race or something like that, we try to notify everyone. It doesn't make everyone happy, but we have notified them.
That's
But,
right.
Just a couple of months, we dealt with an issue with the construction.
Yes.
And it was an eyesore and all these things. And we came to a conclusion to work with this individual who's trying to do something better for the community, even though it disrupted the community for a little bit with storage of containers and
Yeah.
stuff. I just, we're going to do whatever the council and manager directs us to do. But
Adrian,
I just want it to be something that we can really focus on making sure it fits the crime, one, and that, we want to be good we want to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money and how we do things, but we also want to treat our businesses and our residents
Absolutely.
fair in this situation.
Absolutely.
And that's a tough job, and I know you'll have to do it, but I just wanted you to get the perspective of how we have to enforce it, and then some of the problems that can come from saying you only have to work in these windows. It creates more problems during the business hours, and then you shut the businesses down that they can't get back and forth to work or schools, then we have another issue.
Yep.
It's just a lot that we have to think about as well on the service end of it.
Yeah. You'll never make everybody happy.
Adrian, within our tree ordinance, did we not kind of make a split there between major development, homeowner to delineate what was applicable to each? It seems like we talked about that, because within our tree ordinance, did we not kind of split between major development and individual homeowner or small developer, that they weren't subject to the same requirements or fines, that we did recognize there was a distinction there?
What we did, yes, sir, we did, and what we did is under the applicability, we listed exemptions, and tree ordinance does not apply to existing single-family lot, so it's actually exempt.
So, I mean, in that spirit, we can look at this ordinance and make the distinction between, major construction site and the individual homeowner and look at it that way, because, I mean, they're two distinct animals. Because like you said, $150 fine to the homeowner, is more substantial than a $150 fine to this guy. I mean, if I've got to meet a deadline, I write that check all day long, every day. I just tell you, come pick up the check.
So that's what we're looking in the direction of. That's why I brought that up, in the direction of the ordinance that y'all would like to see. That's why I brought that up. Let's make a distinction.
I mean, the whole thing's communication. If you let them know what's going on beforehand, I don't think you'll have a problem.
We hope.
No,
You hope. Well, I mean, you're always going to have some people complain. You're never going to please everybody, but still,
Well, I'd be pretty
They've been
pissed
informed.
off if somebody was
Yeah.
shining lights at my house
Yeah.
at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Regardless of whether they told me about it or not.
The dust that's in the air, I've heard people complain about the red dust from the clay, but also the white cloud when they're cutting and sanding the concrete. I know you can use wet sanding and wet polishers, and they're supposed to spray down the construction site when it's dry, where the traffic is, I understand, to keep all that dust from being raised. Is that within our purview, or is that OSHA? I mean, where does that fall? Do we have judgment over that to make sure?
Talking about work site regulation of erosion control and dust.
I'm just talking
Air
about
quality.
the air quality, because it's, that's not.
No.
If it was silica, be one to the air, OSHA would regulate that. It's a brownfield site, though, benzene, and that's contaminated soil. That's
So-
the watershed. It's, sorry.
Thank you, but this is not a public, this thing. So the dust from the dirt is something that we have reported to NCDEQ. So Hayden Davis, our stormwater coordinator, when we got the first complaints about the mud or dirt leaving the site onto the roadway, contacted the county, contacted NCDOT, and then when we got the complaints about the dust, then we contacted DEQ. So we've handled that, and I've seen Hayden's email chain the day that we get the complaint, she's forwarding them to DEQ. So we don't have any jurisdiction on dust. So that's a DEQ issue. If in fact the contractors are cutting concrete or any other material that has silica going into the air, that's an OSHA regulation. So we don't do workplace safety. That's what OSHA does. So if residents see that, they can call OSHA on the site. So, but I also want to let you know, because I saw some stuff on social media that we're all incompetent. We don't know what we're doing. We're just here to support the business at the expense of the residents. You got very qualified staff. You should be really proud of them, and you should thank them for what they're doing. Lindsay's out there. Lindsay and Gary are on this site all the time. Gary and Kyle are out there every single day. We're doing our best to make sure that they build the site that you allow them to build in accordance with the ordinance. Problem, we had the two biggest issues we've had, well, three biggest issues has been the dust and the mud. We're addressing those as best we can and referring them to the appropriate regulatory authorities. We've got the noise from the construction, and you've heard about that, and the lighting. The lighting is, there's no ordinance about how to direct lights. It's just common sense, good neighbor not to direct a lighting tower into somebody's house. First time we got a complaint about that, you addressed it. They turned the lighting towers around. So we're on it. We're doing what we can, and we're enforcing the ordinances that we have. This noise ordinance is 25 years old or something like that. Don't know that it's been updated to address the more complicated issues we have. I mean, normally where it comes into effect is, and we had an issue at Amberley this summer, I think. They were starting earlier or working later and past sunset, working on the roof, hammering, neighbors complained. You addressed it. So that's, or if you're having a house party, or you got something going on and it's just loud at night. That's probably 99% of those complaints are those smaller things that we can address using the existing ordinance. So this is a new issue because of this size construction. This is an unusually large building for Belmont. We've had about 5 of these in the last many years. So it's an unusual situation. Our ordinance doesn't neatly address it. So if we want to update the ordinance for it, we can do that. But it is a little bit more complicated than just, shut them down or fine them $1 million. So we've got to have some sort of process that we have the authority to do. So we've got to have statutory authority to do it, and it's got to be a reasonable remedy.
Well, I think you guys are doing a good job. It's just you have an ordinance that you have to work with that is not compatible right now with the situation at hand. So
right now, what Lindsay has been doing on our boat has been researching other municipalities, and guess what? Not much basis, because most people in these situations probably do exactly what we're doing right now, is try to minimize it, deal with what we have, and work with the residents, work with the companies. And so we're finding that their ordinances are not much different than ours. So
it sounds to me like we could address lighting, even though we shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
We can address that fairly easily, I guess, and then police enforcement can just enforce that. Maybe add a special permit process for large construction projects.
Right.
And they can either be approved with special permit, or if they're not approved and they do it anyways, then they get fined.
Yeah.
And then to Richard's point, we have 2 tiers of fines, or maybe multiple tiers of fines, going from residential. Maybe, I don't know how you break it up.
Yeah.
This project's probably also different than somebody building a gas
Big
station.
project.
So,
Yeah.
because that
Big project.
so, and maybe just tier it up based on the total investment of the project or square foot, or how we all want to do that. But outside of that, I don't really see what else you all want to do. But I think all that makes sense, and that's about as good as we can address it. But if you get the special permit, you have to send a letter out to everybody and let them know.
Within 1,000 feet as provided in the ordinance.
Right.
Maybe also consider mitigation measures, whatever's appropriate for the. I mean, it'd have to be, I guess, maybe some staff discretion there about what makes sense for a particular site. But
mitigating what?
Well, like light and noise, and I don't like at least. I mean, you may not be able to do anything, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm having trouble thinking of a good way of putting it.
I think it'd be good too if we could steer the residents after they're contacting, like if they have an issue, to call staff at the police department. Like, if I was outside playing an electric guitar, somebody's going to call the cops. They're not going to go on social media and say Ryan's playing an electric guitar outside, right? So if we get them to call the cops, and they can run up there and handle it like professionals versus
Yeah, there's things like the lighting, those are simple issues. We can, for the most part, get those things fixed.
Yeah.
And if they were out there hammering nails or, putting up siding, that is one issue. But like I say, from everything I understand about concrete, that's another issue.
Yeah.
But even in our ordinances with the due process, it's like, in a lot of ordinances, I mean, they're built, because it's just like laws. If someone's speeding today here on Cobb Street and we charge them, if we stop them tomorrow, doesn't mean we can take them to jail or make them stop driving. There's a process that we have to continue to follow and citing them and all those things. And that's the way the laws are.
And the more
Sure.
weighty your property interest, the more due
Yeah.
process you're entitled to before you can be deprived of it.
So that's the problem. And I just want to, of everything said here, that we're going to work, we're going to try to make the ordinance better, we're going to research it.
Mhm.
I just want the citizens to understand, we have done every single thing possible that we are lawfully capable of doing at this point. We have not
Yeah.
neglected the citizens, we have not done anything to try to hurt them, we have tried to help. And that's why we're standing before you today to say, we have followed the process that's been laid before us that we are capable of doing as city staff. And so when we get beat up on social media for not doing our job, if we step outside of this, then we are being unlawful.
Yeah.
And we're not gonna do that.
You said this is the last pour tonight?
Of this building.
This is it.
So, well,
Last
you're
section.
not stopping them from doing it. That's what you're telling me.
No.
All right, so they're doing this tonight.
Unless you direct us to break the law, we're not
So-
going to.
That would
So
be
they're
an
pouring
ultra
this
vires
tonight,
act.
and then we can come up with a permit process, and then vote
Mhm.
on that. And you guys have heard enough, I think, of how we do that.
And just for the record, I did speak with the property owner developer, Scott Bortz, about this. And last week when we got the complaints, I said, we're going to handle it with your contractor, but I want to let you know what's going on since you're in Charlotte and they're here. And so he talked to his contractors about the same issues and helped get the lighting towers redirected and the stuff. He's also asked for some of the contact information for the individuals who've reached out to us so that they can talk to them and find out in case there's, if there's some things that,
There's gonna be a lot of issues up there.
Yeah.
this year.
but
See,
yeah,
that's what, if I can, maybe I don't like bi-weekly meetings, like every couple of weeks with those folks, because it seems like we're hearing every month or two, something comes up with this site. And it's caused more consternation than any other project since I've been on council. And I just, I understand it's messy and, that's construction and that's how it works. Sometimes I wonder how interested they are in being good neighbors. And maybe if we just kept the lines of communication open every 2 weeks or so, even if it's a very short meeting, to address any concerns that come up in a more prompt manner.
I can certainly suggest that to them. And
I think they're having like daily meetings.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
with them to make sure,
Okay.
because we are trying to.
I just want to make sure we keep the lines of communication
yes,
open.
and I think
because-
that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Is making sure that the residents know to contact staff
Mm-hmm.
when there's a complaint, a question. Staff follows up on it, working through the general contractor or the property owner, and then we can, then you can have direct contact between the residents and the property owner. If there's issues, if you messed up my house, if you flooded out, you put mud all in my pool, and I'm mad about that. I'm not going to yell at Lindsay about it. I'm going to yell at the contractor. The contractor can fix those types of things. Are not city issues, but we can suggest as a developer work with the property owners to remedy those.
Gary, I appreciate what you do because it's a monumental task to get these people in line and get that much concrete poured. That's a lot of concrete trucks.
It's a big slab, it's a big building, 8 times bigger than this building.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything?
Well, just thank you all for what you've done.
Thank you.
Thankless task.
Can we contract out code enforcement? That's my last request.
We've got a good code enforcement officer, and we want to keep her.
Thank you. All right.
I've seen it, and then because I've seen some cases, and then the people they contracted out to are various competencies
I know
and
they're probably elusive too at times.
Yes, and then guess who ends up getting sued? The contractor and the people who hired them. Yes.
All right, ready for the
Okay.
next item?
Thank you.
Item number 1, discussion on developing a plan for spending American Rescue Plan funding.
Oh, by the way, are somebody going to maybe mention that it's happening again tonight, if people aren't already aware?
I can send out a targeted message to those individuals in that area.
Okay.
The Water Smart.
But caveat, they have to be signed up for Water Smart.
If we have their contact information,
Okay.
they'll-
Yeah,
we
so
can notify them.
All right.
I don't
Sure.
have any of them, but maybe you do. So,
Got
But
a couple.
Richard, I mean, if there's someone that's contacted you directly, I'd probably just,
I know the McLeans and the Humphreys, so I can give them a call.
yeah, I'd
They're on
probably just reach
sites.
out to them directly, but I will send a targeted
Okay.
message to them to let them know. I'll get up with Gary on timelines.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure that if a few of them know, they can spread the word
Yes.
up and down the street pretty quickly
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the last one on this building.
on this
On
particular
this
building.
building, yes.
And the good news is the east building is farther away and they're very
If they
few
don't run
houses
out of
around
concrete.
it. Right, absolutely.
All right.
So we've had a couple of discussions about the American Rescue Plan or ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, funding. I'll go over just very briefly this again because we do have a little bit of new information. We were expected to get about $3.5 million from the federal government. We actually are going to get slightly over $4 million total through the American Rescue Plan. We received, so it comes in two tranches. We received the first one in August of slightly over $2 million, and then we'll get the next one 12 months later. So in August of 2022, we'll get the final $2 million. So it'll be $4,002,202.50 is what we'll actually receive. So we have to obligate or designate how we're going to spend all this money by December 31st of 2024. So we still have 3 years to figure all this out, how we're going to do it. And we have to actually spend all the money by December 31st, 2026. Any money that we don't spend, we have to give back to the federal government. So we need to figure out how to spend it.
Well, the spending of money never seems to be our problem, so.
No, we're very good at spending money. And if we can spend federal money, that's even better. So you heard a presentation from Morgan and Ryan this summer. The federal government has sort of big buckets of eligible activities, but they're not going to pre-qualify each individual project. So the federal government, U.S. Treasury, is overseeing this. They say these are the broad categories that you can spend the money on, and only those categories. And then they've got some follow-up guidance, and then they have FAQs that Treasury posted last month with some a little bit more information. They did a public comment period. They received thousands of comments from local governments and state governments across the country that are going through that. So we're still awaiting the final rule. From everything that we're hearing, we don't anticipate the categories broadening out to include more things. It's going to be more just sort of finalizing what they've already said. All the guidance that I'm getting from the School of Government, from the Central Iowa Regional Council, from the League of Municipalities, is to wait. Don't rush into spending this because, as we've talked about with the state budget, the House put all the states' ARP money in the budget. The Senate didn't. They've got to figure that out. But there's a silly amount of money that the state's getting from the American Rescue Plan that are in these same categories. The hope is that we would be able to leverage some of our money with state money and be able to have a bigger impact than just $4 million. We don't know that that's going to be the case, but that's all the indication that we're getting from the state. So while I'm going to give you sort of a very broad concept plan today, we don't need to fill in all $4 million now, and we may want to scrap it all and just wait on what the state's going to do with the state budget. The governor had his plan for what's going to do. Of course, the legislature will tell the governor what he's going to do with that money. So we've got two things that we have to do. First, it's got to be an eligible ARP expense, and then we have to have statutory authority to spend the money on it in North Carolina. There's a lot of auditing stuff on the back end and reporting on the back end, and I've sat through about 10 hours of webinars from the school government last week. I'll do it again this week, and it's super interesting, and I certainly welcome you to come over and watch it with me. But there's it's one of those things where the federal government says, here's this money, we'll give you ideas of sort of how we'd like for you to spend it, but we're not going to tell you exactly how to do it. And if you don't spend it correctly, we're gonna get you on the back end. So we have to be very careful about it. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, the broad categories are to respond to the public health emergencies with respect to COVID-19, to address the negative impacts, economic impacts caused by COVID-19, to replace lost local government revenue, to provide premium pay to essential workers, public sector workers, and to invest water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So the public health emergencies, we spent a lot of money last year on PPE and things like that related to when we were in what we thought was the beginning of the pandemic, the middle of the pandemic last year. We've been reimbursed through a separate federal funding of the CARES Act, so we got about $180,000 back from that. So we don't really have public health emergency spending so much with the city for this. Clearly, we had negative economic impacts with businesses being closed, with people not being allowed to go into places. And then there's sort of an expansion of what that really means, negative economic impacts. There's a very complicated formula for determining lost local government revenue. And as best we can tell, we didn't lose revenue last year because sales tax just crushed it. So there are some small rural areas that really lost a lot of their revenue. So that will help them. We would not be applicable. Premium pay to essential workers. This would be for frontline city staff who were public facing during the pandemic. People worked in the office who didn't have to, while we were closed or working from home, would not be eligible for this. This would be up to $13 an hour above and beyond what you would have paid your employees. We've looked into this. It would be very expensive to do that. And we were very fortunate we didn't have to lay off anybody. We kept paying everybody. We took care of our employees. This is not a universally popular notion, but I don't think that we need to pay premium pay to our essential workers for what they did last year. We took all the necessary protocols to keep our employees safe when they interacted with the public. The broadest category is investments in water and sewer and broadband. In North Carolina, we don't have statutory authority to spend money on broadband. So that's federally eligible, but not state eligible. So cross that one off. So then you look at water and sewer. You don't have to show any correlation to COVID for the water and sewer. They also include stormwater in their definition of water and sewer infrastructure. So water, sewer, stormwater. So just in very broad conceptual discussions, kind of breaking out what I think we could start, at least for starting a discussion of how we could spend this money. We've got a CIP list of projects. We don't have to come up with new projects on how to spend this money. We've got them here. We've got, I would say, let's spend at least half, if not over half, about $2.5 million on water, sewer, and stormwater investments, and using the CIP on there. And I'll give you a couple projects here in a second. Parks and public open space upgrades to address the negative health and economic impacts caused by COVID-19 of $1 million. This is one of those that at the very beginning of the interim guidance, it didn't look like you could use it on what we would consider general fund projects like parks. But with subsequent guidance from the Treasury with the FAQs, they did say that if you had, because things were closed last year, entertainment options in 2020 were limited, people went to public parks. And if you went to any of our parks last year, they were just crawling with people. Sometimes it kind of freaked me out seeing all the kids on the playground in April and May of last year.
At least we weren't, did we do the ones where we put police tape all over the playground equipment? That was kind of, I thought, overkill.
We did not do that. So when COVID started and when playgrounds were still open, the Public Works Department sprayed them, I think, a couple times a day with disinfectant. Mm-hmm. With movie theaters being closed, with everything else being closed, all the traditional entertainment activities being closed, we wanted to keep our parks open as long as we could. But finally, we had to close them. And we did, we just put signs out. And it was sort of we hope you follow the signs, but we're not going to tape it off. And if people used the swings while they were closed, well.
Rebels.
Yes, if they call the police, we would ask them to leave, but we don't want to take that away from people. But the FAQ said that if your parks saw increased usage during COVID because they were basically the only game in town, and you had maintenance issues and deteriorated equipment, you can use this ARP money to make those improvements, to replace it. You really shouldn't be expanding your thing or adding new stuff. You should be addressing the impact of COVID, so replacing things that were damaged or overused during COVID. They also, and I think this is kind of interesting, and I don't know how we would do it, but they said if you had like an outdoor space, people couldn't eat inside a restaurant last year, so they ate outside. If you had kind of like a public green or a special plaza that you could retrofit to make it so that people could gather outside on there or have picnics or eat, get takeout and eat somewhere. We had a little bit of that on our benches downtown. We noticed our trash cans by the benches on Main Street were always overflowing because people would get takeout from Sammy's or somewhere, and they would eat it on a bench because you couldn't eat inside. We saw a little bit of that in Stow Park as well. But you could use that to kind of enhance an area and make it a nicer place for the next time this happens and we have to shut down restaurants. People could still get takeout and eat there. So
Next time.
Do you know something?
I don't know anything, but my hunch is that COVID-19 is not going to be the last airborne issue that we have in the future of humanity. So between now and when Jesus comes back, we're probably going to have another pandemic. I don't know when that's going to be.
I'll wait for Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm not.
So I think Stow Park is probably set up well for this, and with the what we have there to eat outside, and then economic recovery programs and activities to help address the negative impacts, negative economic impacts.
So would that be the bucket in which the Mott Cross Emerge falls?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask you two qualifying questions?
Of course.
Before you go into this, if we submit a project and it gets rejected and they want to come in on the back end, can we submit a different project then if we spend the money somewhere else?
So my understanding is Treasury is not going to pre-qualify any projects. You can't say, "Hey, I'd like to do this." They're not going to. They're going to say, consult with your attorney, and read the regulations. And if you think it's eligible, do it. And if you don't think it's eligible, don't do it. If you spend the money on something that's not eligible, from what I understand from my webinars last week, at some point we may or may not get audited, but it would be at some point if we got audited by the federal government on how we spent our $4 million. If we spent it on something that they deemed ineligible, they would make us pay the money back. So there's...
So you couldn't take another project and be like, hey,
because you have to have spent the money by December 31st of 2026.
It might be
even if
after
you
that.
already spent it, could you
Correct.
just, I mean, so let's just say we say, hey, here's our part. We did this. They say no. So, well, actually, what we did was the sidewalk over here. Like, could you?
So that's where you can go to jail.
Okay.
So so there's lots of reporting, and what we'll have to do is in
I
school.
won't be going to jail. Just
We'll make sure we do this after December 2nd.
Somebody else will be serving my time.
Yes. So what we'll have to do is so we have to have our first reporting of how we're spending money in April of next year, and then I think we do it annually. I think in October of each year, we do it annually of how we spent it. This is every local government and state government in the United States will be uploading these reports.
Who gets to read them?
Somebody at U.S. Treasury or the GAO. So we're doing these reporting. So if I report that we spent this money on X project and I've signed it and certified it, and then when they come to audit us, I say, not really. I was kidding about that report. I really spent on that. I'm too pretty to go to jail, and I'm just not willing to do that. So no, you can't
So it
do
basically
that.
works like income taxes. Take your best guess, and if you're wrong, you go to jail.
Yes, we don't know how much you owe, but you tell us, and
Yeah.
but if you're wrong, we're
Yeah.
going to get you.
Yeah, okay.
But the best I can tell, the penalty for misspending this is that you'd have to pay it back.
No interest.
I haven't heard that level of detail. So the goal would be to make sure you spend it correctly so that you don't have to pay it back. Does that answer your?
It does.
Okay. So yes, there is reporting throughout. So for water, sewer, and stormwater, we've talked about the North Belmont Water Booster Pump Station.
Right.
And I think this one is clear. Well, they're all eligible because they're water, sewer, and stormwater. I think this is what is sort of intended by this because they have these things called qualified census tracts, which is basically a low to moderate income census tracts that's eligible for additional federal programming. We only have one in Belmont, and it's North Belmont between 85 and somewhere on Acme Road. And so the North Belmont Water Booster Pump Station will provide better water pressure and more reliable water supply in that area, so in that qualified census tract. And this project is clearly needed to allow for water supply and water pressure to serve Dixon Village, which is Habitat for Humanity neighborhood. So the total cost in the CIP for that project is $657,000. So I recommend that we use ARP money to pay for that project. Just as an update, we've got our appraisal back, so we'll need to purchase property. When we're designing it now, it's permitting now, so we'll be paying the cost of that over the next 6 months. But I would prefer that we use ARP money and not water and sewer money on that. And then would like to spread this money around the city so that we're not focusing in on one part of town or another. In your CIP, you've got upgrades that are planned for various pump stations. These are not expansions. These are just making those pump stations work more efficiently, be more energy efficient, last longer. They're mechanical equipment, so you have to make upgrades and do maintenance on them periodically. There are several in there at a total cost of just over $1 million. I think that's going to help keep reliable wastewater treatment service to various parts of our community. So I think that would be eligible. On the stormwater side, looking at projects we have around town, and on the stormwater CIP, we have culvert replacements all over town to help with storm drainage. And you all hear more than anybody. Yep. We're having these big storms, and we'll get an inch or two of rain in a very short amount of time. It flushes all that water down. So having culverts that are sized appropriately is important. So I think that's
something that's very visible, and people can see what the money's being used for and the improvements.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's going to be difficult to have a ribbon cutting for a pump station improvement. Or we will have a ribbon cutting for the new pump station because it's going to be really cool. But upgrading the pumps and the motors and all that for the sewer pump stations is probably not something that's going to get in the newspaper, but it's certainly needed. These culvert replacements will, to your point, Jim, will be things that people will see and will notice.
Adrian, how much does $305,000 get us in stormwater? How many projects, or Jerry, and what are we looking at there?
I've got it in here. It's in the CIP. So I looked at that would be the Lincoln Street culvert replacement, the Thayers Avenue culvert replacement, the Clay Street culvert replacement, Woodrow Avenue culvert replacement at Westwood Drive, Todd Street. No, Todd Street was too expensive. There was another one. Maybe the Todd Street. So areas around town.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking, I mean, the stormwater fund doesn't replenish itself at the rate that the water and sewer fund does. And that's always been a problem, is it doesn't have the revenue to take on these projects. So with that in mind, I mean, I like these projects, but these will generate their own revenue over time. Whereas these, I mean, does that clean that up pretty well? Because, unless we do something about our stormwater, I think we're under statute how much we can charge. We're limited. So it's always going to just bring in fixed amount of dollars, X amount of dollars. So, I mean, the free money term, I guess, I don't like the sound of it. In a way, this is found money or free money. So is there any logic in cleaning up a lot of the stormwater because it just doesn't replenish itself at the rate the others do?
So when you increase the stormwater fee 2 years ago, I think it was 2 budgets ago, that helped with our capital. So we are being more aggressive on that, but it is by far our smallest fund.
Yeah.
And we have less money to spend on capital projects in the stormwater fund than we do any other. Doing this plus what we've already got programmed for this year, if you take out the material storage facility, which is $1 million project, that will knock out our top 10 priority items.
Really? Okay.
By doing this.
Okay.
I like that thinking because that's exactly what
I was just sort of going down the list.
I'm like, we should do stormwater.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean,
Now, and this is just my suggestion. This is going to be your plan because I want you to sign it, not me.
But your suggestion is in line with my thinking.
Okay, good. Then I must have gotten
we
it right.
want you to sign it.
So, thinking to spend some money on stormwater, water, and sewer.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, those projects are right at $2 million.
Yeah.
Now, I think I've included in one of my reports to you that Habitat for Humanity has requested $500,000 in ARP money and what they requested was to help them cover the cost of their water, sewer, and paving of Dixon Village. And so paving is ineligible, cannot do it. That's a hard no.
Right.
Water and sewer would be eligible. My counter to that, if counter is the right word, is we're spending $600,000 on a booster pump station that was a nice thing to do to increase water pressure. Well, the residents up there in that area already have, the water pressure exceeds the minimum needed for fire protection and domestic use. It's just not great, but it meets all the requirements. Dixon Village tripped the need to put in the booster pump station. So were it not for Dixon Village, we wouldn't need to do the booster pump station. It would be a nice thing to do, but we wouldn't have to do it. So when you approved Dixon Village, you also said, let's do this project because now we can provide adequate water and water pressure for Dixon Village, and it just happens that we can also help the rest of that community. So I sort of think that us doing the booster pump station is a big help to Habitat for Humanity. Now, that's your decision if you want to spend $500,000. I've also asked Habitat to contact Gaston County because this will be it's not just for Belmont residents. It's not just limited to Belmont. So anybody can move into there who meet the Habitat requirements. Traditionally, you do not pay for water and sewer infrastructure for residential development. So this would be the first time for that. Now, Habitat's different than everybody else. I get that. But I put that out there that they have made that request. So
but the
you don't
total
have to
so far is 1.9. So if we did the 500, that would still be within the 2.5.
It'd be 2.5. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So that would be a decision that y'all would need to make, and you don't have to make it now. But Habitat is getting a little bit antsy because they're wanting to get started construction here shortly.
I think we did more than generous with that project.
I
thus
agree.
far. There's also a project that's never going to pay for the services that we're already going to provide.
Well,
So it would be like doubling down on this asset. And I think we've kind of reached our ceiling on the charitable side of what the city should be willing to do.
There's 28 homes. I mean, when you average that out, that is a lot. I mean, I think we've got to do the most good for the most that we can with this money.
Does that 500 include paving?
That was what they asked for, and then I asked for their line item budget of all their infrastructure costs. Paving was a couple $100,000, but they had $500,000 in water, sewer alone.
All right.
It was like 220 for the water and something close to that for the sewer.
$17,000 per house.
And so, not to get too much of a tangent on Dixon Village. It is so far north and so far isolated because of the lack of street connectivity. We will lose money serving it. It will be a very expensive neighborhood to serve, sending police, fire, solid waste up there to do it, because you have to go up Hickory Grove Road and down Lee Road. So it's good, and we serve all of our residents, whether they make us money or whether we lose money on them based solely on the tax value. But it will be a very expensive neighborhood for us to provide services to.
Well, do we have to decide today?
You don't have to decide today.
Okay.
Another thought. I know we've talked before about the bathrooms in Stow Park, and how that's been hard to justify financially because of the expense involved with upgrading some of the water lines and stuff that run into it. Just kind of throwing that out there as maybe this might be an opportunity to address that problem.
I might have got another one right.
Oh, okay.
So next slide.
Oh, wow.
No, trust me, if I can get two things right in a week, I've done something. And with the Cowboys winning overtime yesterday, I'm good for the whole week.
You go out and buy a lottery ticket.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, the FAQs say that if your park's got increased usage and had increased wear and tear because of COVID, then you can use ARP money to make some replacement projects. So we're going to talk about the playground replacement at Kevin Lofton River Park, and that clearly saw increased usage last year. That was the reason why we had to shut down that playground equipment. It was already had some increased usage from what it was really designed for, but last year was sort of, the tipping point on that. And we'll get into that in a separate discussion. That's a $422,000 playground equipment. So yes, it's very expensive. I mentioned some outdoor, improving outdoor spaces for folks. On our CIP, we have picnic shelters at Davis Park. I think you could justify that as a place for people to gather, socially distant. It's not really walkable. Well, it is walkable from downtown, but if you got takeout, you could eat there. That may be eligible. That may not be eligible. We'll just have to sort of think on that one. But that's an example. I was looking at our Parks and Rec CIP list and trying to figure out if they're eligible or not. Most of them would not be because they're new. This would be an improvement to an existing park by the playground that would offer an opportunity for some safe social distant gathering. And as Councilman Seelinger said, we need to make some improvements to the Stow Park restroom facility based on the current plumbing, based on the size of it. It's inadequate for our needs. It has seen a lot of usage, as Stow Park has continued to see increased usage last year and this year. We've got a project in the CIP for $587,000. I think if you increase the capacity, the number of stalls in that restroom building, you increase the plumbing so that you decrease our maintenance cost. You make it more usable so it's not always being shut down and to be fixed, and also have better ventilation in there and better sanitation practices within that building. I think you can make a pretty clear case that that's eligible for that. I'm with you. To me, I'm old enough that $600,000 for a restroom is a lot of money. So it's sort of hard to justify that in the scheme of things. But I think in light of this, I think you could justify that.
Well, the estimates that David Eisenhower got, the original plan was to raise it to the ground and build another one. Those estimates were coming in at $1 million.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, retrofitting this one makes more sense.
I would agree.
Yeah.
So the cost of those projects is just over $1 million. But I think this is a good opportunity to use federal funding to make some enhancements to the parks that clearly showed increased usage. People love our parks. They used it when they didn't have any other options. We can, and I don't want to get political with you at all, but I forget which one of the league or the school government said, try to tailor your projects for what Congress wanted. And they said, if you can show that you're building something back better than what it was, that's going to make them happy. Clearly, the Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park playground equipment is better than what we've got now, and we'll show it to you in the next. It's with the shades, with the accessible.
Well, that would be one thing that was built back better.
Yes, it would. Yes,
On the bathroom.
in the bathroom. Yes, so both of those. So that's why I'm thinking,
Two things in Belmont
right.
are built back better.
Yes. So, so I think those are the kinds of things that we can do, and I think it's clearly eligible. We'll get into the park, the playground equipment, but it would be with that rubber surfacing, so it would be more accessible for all users, with those with mobility challenges. It's going to have the shade structure, so you can use it during the day when it's blazing hot outside. So I think that's clearly eligible. But again, I'm just looking at stuff that's on our CIP list. We don't have to identify all these projects today, but these are just food for thought, and we've got 3 more years to figure out how to spend all this. So just be thinking about that.
When do you get the first allocation?
We got it in August, so we already have $2 million in our account that we could spend, and we'll get 2 more in August of next year.
I mean, we can discuss it all, but I mean, for me, I'd green light that Stow Park bathroom. I mean, I don't have any qualms about that myself.
Okay. Anybody have any qualms about proceeding with that, and we can at least get some revised plans and using the ARP funding on it?
How far outside on our priority list?
That is, we normally have 2 to 3 departments on a page. Parks and Rec has an entire page themselves. Because Zip wants to spend some money. So the Stow Park restroom is number 5 priority. So the rec center is number 1, that's underway. The skate park is number 2, that's on the way. Rocky Branch Trail enhancements is underway. So security cameras, since working on that. So it would be the next item.
Yeah.
So we're not jumping down the list.
Yeah, I mean, when you go there and you see the lines, I mean, you just don't have the capacity to fill the need.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's fine.
In both bathrooms. Yes.
Yes.
We did that
If that wasn't implied.
we
The men and the blue guys.
yes. That was my contribution to the River Park restroom when my children were little. Then I was like, I need to change a table too, because I got stuck with the kids a lot, and I loved
You don't
every
realize
minute
how
of
much
it.
you like those until you
What's
don't
a
have
change
them.
on
Yeah, until you need them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't ask me. I hope you never find out.
And so then the next item would be economic recovery programs. You've already committed to the Montcross Emerge at $60,000, $20,000 a year for 3 years. We also talked about the Go Gaston campaign that's promoting Belmont and our local businesses. They're asking for about $15,000 each year, so we could do that for 3 years.
Yeah.
Using ARP money. And then our community development department, Main Street, has asked for $75,000 to help enhance our downtown events in Stow Park, so that they can increase attendance, do new things, enhance what we're doing over the next 2 years, hopefully to draw more people to downtown using our events as economic development.
We better get that bathroom ready.
So so before we invite everybody downtown, we need to make sure they can use the restroom.
Ribbon cutting for that.
I was, putting about $500,000 in this bucket, and these requests are about $180,000. So we can leave this open because there may be some programs that we just don't know about yet, and leave a little bit of wiggle room. And I don't want to allocate the full $4 million in case we have more. If we want to spend more on stormwater, for example, than what I had mentioned earlier.
So let me ask you something. If we're allocated funds and then we're gonna reallocate these to another group, are they gonna be reporting to us on how they spent that money? Because ultimately Uncle Sam's gonna come and say, okay, well, I don't care what they did with it. You gave it to them. Justify it.
So that was Friday's webinar, and they would be a subrecipient of our money. There's a whole process in place that we get to do, and they have to do reporting for us so that we can report back to the federal government, because we're responsible for how we spend the money, even if we're not spending it. So we have to make sure that whatever agency we provide our money to is capable of doing it correctly. And so we've talked to the Montcross Chamber, at actually last week's meeting, about the fact that by accepting the ARP money, I know Lowell's going to use ARP money. I believe Mount Holly's going to use ARP money. We're using ARP money. There's going to be reporting requirements for them, and so we'll help them. The good news is we'll have like one template, so they don't have to do it differently for us, differently for Lowell, differently for Mount Holly. But yes, they have to report and are held accountable for how they're spending their money, and that will be rolled up into our report that we send to Treasury.
And these would all be in the realm of what's got to be spent on, so
Right.
that's good. That's a good thing.
I mean, some of this stuff, I don't know how you could quantify it. You say we increased attendance, okay. Over what? By how many? And how did you come to that conclusion? You know, those would be the
Good
questions
plan.
that I would be asking.
Right. So these are the requests that we've received so far on the economic recovery side. But yes, so data collection is going to be important, and some of it is going to be.
Well, I know, like for the Museum on the Moon, they're going to have some sort of clickers or something to figure out what attendance was. So I think there's not going to be like turnstiles or anything like at a stadium, but I think there are ways to sort of figure out attendance.
I would keep the subjective stuff as a lower percent of the overall spend.
Right.
Keep the real kind of infrastructure type stuff.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
good.
absolutely.
And then just keep it proportional. So
Mhm.
whenever you file tax, you just have to keep it realistic.
Mhm.
I don't think they come to audit $4 million in Dunbar, but we'll see.
So they would have to audit every single local government and state government in the United States.
Well, I mean, is it more than six? I mean, it's apples to oranges, but is it more than $600? Yeah. They want to audit some other things.
Some people.
Yes,
As a matter of course, they're going to do
Right.
it.
Yeah.
And with our luck, they'll pick us.
Well, depending what happens with Dixon Village, whether it does or does not, there may be another $500,000 at play.
Mhm.
So I don't know where that goes or what that means in that event.
So this is just sort of first stab at kind of a framework of how we want to spend that $4 million. And again, we've got plenty of time to do it. We've got 3 more years to obligate this funding, and we need to wait and see what the state's going to do, and certainly wait for final guidance. It's very unlikely that they're going to say, "Oh yeah, now you can pave roads with it." If they put in streets, I'd recommend we spend all $4 million on street paving and sidewalk greenway projects. But that has not been eligible, so we can only spend it on what they say we can spend it on.
Right.
And this is my sort of beginning thought on it. So certainly open to any of your suggestions on it. If you have ideas, be thinking about this. And
Are we going to develop some sort of process by which these determinations will be made, or that people can come submit requests to the extent that there's money that's not been earmarked? I think that was part of the original question when Montcross and Habitat approached us about these figures. So, I mean, is that, process, it's just, you keep saying we have time, it seems like time to develop some processes, because that's always good to have up front.
so if you want to entertain outside requests like from Habitat and the Chamber, we can do that. We would need to come up with a process and an application form and how you kind of gauge whether or not it's eligible, and kind of pre-screen it and then send it to you, almost like a grant process. I was looking at it more of, you've already identified the city's needs. $4 million is a lot of money, but
Not as much as you
it's not it doesn't go as far as it used to.
I don't think I would encourage outside requests at all.
I agree.
I think another thing that we could do is, when you get the inside judicial process, there's the 3 questions that we have a finding of, or like whatever we approve,
think it looks good.
we have to make a separate approval that is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. I think as these projects get approved, the council can make a finding,
Yeah.
also say it's consistent with the ARP program. And I think that way, if in the future, if these questions come up, I mean, we don't have the answer. It's best judgment.
And it'll be Adrian's get out of jail free card, because he can say, "Hey, council said it
Ryan
was."
voted for it, so
Yeah.
send him to jail.
But I think something like that would be a
Yeah,
good
like-
process.
yeah.
Yes.
As you kind of
We'd have
look at
legislative
each one of these
immunity.
projects and be like, we support this and it's consistent with the ARP program.
And-
And you have that as your backdrop. So,
Yeah.
a few years back, if one of the projects doesn't work out, somebody can look at that and go, oh, it's reasonable.
But I
reasonably
think,
funded.
I think this makes common sense here, and I think as long as it's within the realm of what they require, that's a good thing.
So what I'd like to do is, at last week's meeting, when I asked you to formally approve the $20,000 from Montcrawls, had a resolution authorizing the use of ARP, and I explained the ARP and which criteria this met.
Good
So
idea.
that way, on the front end, you're all aware of it. So if I try to sneak in something that's clearly ineligible,
Sure.
like you call me out on it.
That's a
But
good
that
idea.
way, you've got the resolution. You're sort of saying, as best we can tell, this is eligible. We're going to use it that way. And then, of course, there's a ton of records we have to keep on each project to verify it.
Is there any, I know you don't know exactly what the state's gonna spend the money on, but do they have to have some plan in place by a certain time so we can see if there's any overlap to where we can work with them on any projects, or?
Kevin, do you remember if the state's under the same timeline we are for obligating their funding and spending it, right? Yeah, so they'd obligate it by 2020 into 2024, spend it by 2026. They've got, so the governor's got his plan, the House is going to have their plans. It's all being negotiated in this year's budget, or this fiscal year's budget. So if they have a budget agreement that's signed into place, that will spell out how they're going to spend. I mean, they've got billions of dollars in all kind of stuff. They've got things for downtowns. They got water. They got sewer. They've got storm. They got a bunch of money.
A lot of stuff, yeah.
And they're gonna be doling it out.
That's the indication that we're getting so far.
Fine. Everybody good with that?
So be thinking about projects, and I'll send this out to you so that you can keep a record of it, of what's eligible and kind of how we want to do it. And then we'll just bring you projects, as we get more information.
Well, I mean, I don't know, and I'm just gonna say it again because this is, I see the need. If we go downtown, you all see the need about that Stow Park bathroom. I mean, that's something I would like to give you some direction on because, I mean, it's a cluster there. I mean, you've got tons of people waiting to get in and use the two facilities in each one. And as we come further out of COVID, we're gonna have more and more events and try to get back to our normal, which is gonna put more pressure on those facilities. So maybe getting ahead of it, having them ready to roll when we get people back out in full force and have those facilities ready. Maybe
It's gonna
something.
be tested over the next 3 weeks like it's never been tested
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
You'll see the true strength of it over the next 3 weeks. with the amount of people that-
Or weaknesses.
come here.
There'll be other stuff there.
Well, the good thing is we have porta johns too.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm seeing heads nodding. So
Yeah, that's fine.
everybody agree with Councilman
Typically,
Turner?
I'd like a little bit more
Go ahead.
time, but if it's number 5 on the CIP list and we're already
I mean, it's really next to
undertaking the
mine.
other 4,
Quote, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a finalized design. And, yeah,
yeah,
And
that's
it's a
right.
good thing we have the porta johns.
yeah.
Good thing we got the porta johns.
That's right. Yes. No, we're planning for it. Yes. Yes. Maybe.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
All right, we're
Good.
ready?
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is consider the approval of new playground equipment at Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park.
Thank you. Is Zip still here? Nope.
Oh, there he is.
Here he is. Zip, you want to talk about your new playground equipment proposal? So, as background, we had to close the playground equipment at the playground at Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park because of safety concerns. It has just been worn slap out over the last 5 years, but particularly the last year. We brought you a proposal this summer that we vetted with the Parks and Rec Board. It met the ADA requirements. It was very similar to what we have in Stow Park. You suggested that we look bigger. We do something a little bit more grand, keeping with the nature theme of the Riverfront Park. And also, you suggested we take a look at what was in the downtown park in Blowing Rock. And so Zip has done that. He's talked to Carolina Parks and Play. I'll show you a couple renderings. He's also taken this project to the Parks and Rec Board, and they've recommended approval of it. You see it's got 2 main playground equipment areas. They're based on the ages of the children using it. There are also swings over here. I don't think the ADA swing is shown, but that's something that is included in the quote. It's got the the rubberized natural surface like at Gant Park Playground. So it's,
Colored like that?
yes, so it would keep that nature theme, so it looks like it's got a little bit of a river going through it. This is great because it's as close to zero maintenance for Bill's guys as possible. I think you just kind of use like a leaf blower to blow out sand. Yeah, it's much better than the mulch that we traditionally use. What's nice is it also has sunshades on here to keep the equipment cool and keep the children and the parents cool. And then there's an overview of it. So Zip, you want to give them any more information and the sticker shock on this and sort of timeline, anything like that?
Well, I think this unit, if we get this unit, this will be a unique piece that we'll have to our network in the parks. It'll be used a lot of people. They currently probably hold about 80 to 85 people at a time. Like Adrian said, we will be changing up and adding an ADA swing to it. And we know in the past, the trees have been cut down because they were rotten. We hadn't replaced those yet, they hadn't grown up. The canopy hasn't grown up yet. So that shade system will actually help us a whole lot. That was one of the complaints that we had for people using our system out there. Currently, right now, with the park being closed, we're seeing a big decline in the reservations for the shelters. So nobody's really using that park as much as they used to. That was one of the most heavily used parks in the past. So this addition right here, I can see the numbers going way up for people coming to that park and using it. This will be a go-to place for the city and for around the county to have this, especially for the service that we have. If you go to a Winter Park, that service over there, be something similar to that. I think we're currently trying to do something in Stow Park. Put that down too. So that would give us 2 places, 3 locations that would be ADA clients. And that's one of the complaints that we've had too, things not being ADA. Does anybody have any questions?
Can you speak to the durability of the equipment? Like, does it come with any kind of warranty or?
I'll have to check with that. We haven't finalized those things yet, but I think that come with a 10-year warranty for that. The play surface definitely has a 10-year warranty with it on the play surface. And for instance, if a piece gets cut or something torn or something like that, you can just replace that patch, so you don't have to replace the whole thing. So that's going to help out a lot. It's going to be a tremendous,
Kind of like tile carpet or something?
right?
You just pull out the square.
Just pull out the square and put a new one in. I think that's really going to decrease our cost by maintenance, and that's been one of the issues that we've had with all the system parts in the system. So it's really going to help out on the maintenance end and allow field staff to do some other things.
Yeah, this is the metal and hard plastic structure like we have at Stow Park and Gantt and Linford. And we get it holds up well. And one nice thing about this equipment is that you see it's spaced out, and the actual playground equipment themselves are on either end. So this would allow for more kids on there and to be spaced out more. So as you're thinking, here you're all on. Once you're in there, you're in there. So this is
The shade system, I think, is going to be something similar to what we're doing at Gantt Field. Up at Gantt, that project is ongoing now. They're doing the inspections tomorrow. That should be completed by this Friday afternoon for shade at Gantt. So this is going to enhance Gantt play units also. So I think it's going to be great for the city of Belmont and the people around.
Now, there's not a shader in the one unit. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's his house. That's just the only part that we're able to do based on the cost.
And
I mean, that's something at a later date that we could add.
I've learned not to assume things. Are the shades put in a position that will block it from the sun?
Yes, they will be. Yes.
That's a good question.
I'm just saying. If I get down there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's not blocking the sun, it's kind of.
Yes, they will be. All right.
Now, is this a rendering or is this the selection?
This is the selection.
I just, y'all did exactly what the direction from city council was, that you vetted and proposed an $81,000 project with equipment, and the direction from us, from council was, oh, bigger and better. And, so you did exactly what we told you to do. And now here's this $422,000 proposal. I don't have kids. I don't understand why the $81,000 unit wasn't adequate. I don't see why we need to spend 5 times as much money on playground equipment when we could have spent and we could have gotten a perfectly adequate structure for $81,000. Even though we're spending ARP money, that only goes so far, and this is money that could be used for other necessary projects. So I just don't understand why we're spending 5 times as much money when the $81,000 replacement I thought was perfectly adequate.
Is the purpose of it because of the safety and the?
One reason is because of safety, another reason is because of ADA.
Well, was the $81,000?
The $81,000 did not include the rubber surfacing. The rubber surfacing, what you're looking at now,
Yeah,
is around $125,000 at sale.
But it was ADA compliant. I remember that
It was,
discussion.
yes.
It was, yeah. But you're still not dealing with the maintenance issue that you have this, so you're gonna have a cost savings down the road because you're not gonna replace that mulch.
yeah.
Okay, we had to replace that mulch,
What kind of mulch we gonna put?
the mulch that you have in there now.
Yeah, I mean, we have to.
About every 2 years, about 2 or 3 years, you have to add to that. That's all.
Yeah.
It's close to $20,000
Yeah.
in just mold.
Yeah.
So 200,000 over 10 years.
And Jim, I can tell you with COVID, the price of this equipment has gone up.
Well, yes, I don't.
I mean,
It
like,
all gone up.
I'm not saying at all that
I don't
we'd
even
get
think
that equipment for 81,000. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I went to Minnesota and found an amazing place like, I've never seen anything like this at this park. And I sent it to Adrian, he had me contact the people of the city. The amount of money that they paid for that in comparison to this, I can show you pictures, was minuscule. And the amount of money, or amount of cost increase in this equipment alone because of COVID has absolutely skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's probably a lot of your increases are right now.
And I will add, this type of surfacing will allow for no staff maintenance really at all. Whereas if you keep the mulch as it is, that's daily maintenance of staff
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Rake that, to fill bare spots. So that's something to consider.
Let me ask you a question. I don't want to be the dark lining around a silver cloud, but you said there's going to be nothing like this in Gaston County. It's going to draw people, from all over, which is good. But I mean, I also want to think about parking. Are we potentially creating a parking then? If there's such a rush of people that wants to come check out this great equipment, because it's got very limited parking there. It's just, and that's just a thought. When you said that, I said, okay, well, if they do come, where are they going to park their vehicles? Because it is a very small parking lot there.
Go to Stow Park.
Yeah, we have no parking at Stow Park.
I would just go to the next park for me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I like this. I mean, I get the design and the materials and the low maintenance and all that. But, what does that adage? Unforeseen consequences sometimes.
So I would, and I know I'm different, and I think parking problems, people wanting to use your stuff and can't find a parking spot is a sign of success. I know it's a sign of frustration for some people, but our plan for the rec center is to have a mid-grade crossing
Right.
at Catawba Street to tie into the sidewalk at Catawba. Mm-hmm. So our plan for overflow parking at the river park is to use the new parking lot at the rec center. Again, it's going to be a scheduling issue. Don't schedule everything that you could possibly have at the rec center while we're all working here during the day. So you've got 100 spaces here that can be used. We'll have, I forget how many spaces at the rec center. So I think that if you can't park at the river park and you're willing to walk a little bit of a way, you could park here and then just cross Catawba Street to go.
And that's, maybe a non-starter, but I mean, for me, I've got to take a look at it 360.
Sure.
There's the cost benefit. Does this generate any negatives?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a nice piece of equipment. It is very similar to the one at Blowing Rock. And I can't think, Martha Rivers has a unique playground and it's different, but short of that, this is
And it's not going to be done overnight anyways.
Well, I mean, yeah, scheduling and getting employees, getting the materials here, and then making sure that the workers stay to do it is going to be tricky.
Yeah.
But I think that between the parking at the park, parking here, the parking at the rec center, I think we can cover that.
Yeah.
And I do feel, as confident as I can be that this is eligible for the ARP funding.
Beautiful.
If it makes you feel any better, the first version of this we got back was close to $700,000, and even spending ARP money, I'm old enough that that's a lot of money, and I was like, Zeb, we got to cut this back. So we did reduce the footprint of it and cut out some things.
Let me ask you, just for scale, if you can remember, what did the equipment at Linford Park cost?
Linford Park was around $107,000.
107?
107, yes, sir.
Okay.
Wow.
A lot smaller.
And the new stuff at Stow Park, what did that run? Any ballpark idea?
Stow Park was 88,000
And that was
without the mulch. But when you talking about
4 years ago.
that's without the mulch. The
Yeah.
mulch would make the price of Stow Park.
Yeah.
It sounds like a good part of the cost is the rubber mat
Correct.
around the bottom. I recall a conversation, I think we had a few, I feel like the Public Works people addressed this at one point where they actually did some sort of analysis and looked at staff time involved with doing the mulch versus spending a bunch of money up front on this or something like this. And the numbers actually worked out. I mean, they can correct me if
Yes.
I'm off on that, but
Yeah, between the staff time and the materials.
What'd you say the rubber thing was gonna cost? Just that?
It's 100.
22,000.
122.
Yeah.
So that takes the park at 300, which is twice the Linford, and it'll be a lot bigger and way more use.
And we'll have sunshades, which is
That's
Sun
true.
shades.
The sunshades are about 48,000.
Yeah.
I do have kids. They're always, everybody who has kids is at all the parks in town. I think there's a large portion of the populations that's happy to have a good portion of their tax dollars go to projects like this. I'm one of them. I'm happy to represent
Well, I was
my
gonna-
folks in the community. I think this is a fantastic park. It's well used, and I think people who pay taxes here think they could use it long term.
I would agree with that. I think
I agree.
this is something that families would be excited to use. I mean, I know it's a big number, but this is kind of intended to be our crown jewel park, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Winston would enjoy it.
Right, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, he's been to the one in
So
Blowing
Raleigh and
Rock,
Lincoln.
and I couldn't
Well-
pull him off of it. And this one is very similar to that. And I think the rubber mat, mathematically at least, from what I understand, seems to make sense. I think you are paying a little bit more for the equipment, but it is nicer equipment that will last 10 years. And it is bigger than, I think, most of the other equipment that we have in the city, too. So, I mean, I think we are getting, I mean, you're paying a little bit more for the quality, but I think it is something that can be justified based on what you're getting.
I mean, it's also, to me, it is expensive. But for the reasons you said, I don't disagree with any of them, but this is also part of a larger picture, which include the lake and the rec center and the skate park.
exactly. Yes.
So it's kind of a complex.
Yeah.
I mean, there are going to be those who recoil from the price tag, but as Ryan said, I mean, my kids have aged out of this type of playground equipment, but they would have gone bananas over something like this.
Parks are full.
Well, I'll say, I agree. We couldn't get the other thing for $81,000 anymore. And between the mulch and the maintenance and the
we'll
hard
say.
surface
We'll say.
and the air, all right.
It's a little bit
We'll say.
closer.
Yeah, I mean, if the numbers, I trust that the numbers, if the numbers add up, because we are saving on the maintenance and the mulch and everything, so that makes it more
How do you
palatable.
take a power washer down there? Clean it?
Yeah, you can take a power wash to watch it.
Watch the
But
equipment.
we haven't seen that much wear and tear or anything during the park. It's not gonna be used
That's
every
nice.
over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice park.
Yeah.
The only
And-
problem is there's nowhere to park up there.
This equipment, so they have a play unit like this, it's from this company in and it was, I mean, it was Barefoot Landing, so it is used all the time, constantly.
Yeah.
With a influx of kids, and it had been there at least, I think, 2 years at the point. So it worked really well, and those people aren't gonna put that kind of equipment in that kind of area unless it's gonna be durable.
Yeah, well, that was because you said Blowing Rock installed their equipment like 2 or 3 years ago, right?
Isn't that right?
Or, yeah, because I was up there this summer and I thought it was brand new when I showed it to you. So it does seem to wear pretty well.
So the upfront cost is high, but Skip, Bill, I mean, you're telling us that over time, we're gonna recover that money in reduced maintenance and the lack of having to replace that mulch. So on balance, it's going to work out.
Yeah,
I would agree, especially over a 10-year period. I mean, think about a 10-year period.
We'll save money.
Yearly, the hours of man-hours it takes to sort through that mulch and get it backfilled, compared to this, which is going to take next to no maintenance.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to last up to 10 years. You're talking a lot of money, well worth the investment.
A lot of savings.
All right, so it's safe to say that it's the considered opinion of our Park and Rec Director and our Public Works Director that this is a good investment, and the numbers bear that out?
Yeah. Thanks, Zip.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we need to make a motion?
I did not create a resolution like we did for the Mont Cross Emerge that delineates that this is eligible based on COVID and all that. I can do that and have it for you on November 1st, but I'd like for you just to at least approve this so that we can sign the contract and get in the queue because of supply chain issues, and hopefully we can get this in
I'm
time.
gonna ask that, do we need to lock in this price like we
Yes.
did with the rec center?
This quote is good for 30 days.
From,
Yeah. So I would appreciate if you would vote.
It says created
Vote
in
on this.
2015.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we can lock this in, and then because we won't have to pay for it until we get it. But then I'd have a resolution on the consent agenda for November 1st with just verifying that it is COVID, ARP eligible.
Yeah, do we need to entertain a motion on?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I'll move to approve as presented.
We have a motion to approve, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
big yes for the budget.
Put a little caveat in there.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
All right, very good. Next item on the agenda is the capital predictor modeling.
I'd like for our
Kevin?
Assistant City Manager, Kevin Kraus, to come and give you an update on this. Yes. So Kevin is standing between you and Ashbrook football.
What time's that game today?
7:30.
7:30.
That's the homecoming game.
Kickoff's at 7:30.
I was gonna try and get.
I'll be on the radio.
Good evening. I'll be brief. Couple months ago, someone from Withers and Ravenel came to go over this capital predictor modeling software. You did ask that we come back with extra models of stormwater and land use. So what I did is, if you can see in your agenda packet, the costs go up tremendously with adding that land use component. I'm not really sure exactly why that is. I think there's just a lot more involved when you add the land use component. And that is an estimate, because they said that we really need to do the data audit first to determine the things that we would need on the land use component. Because if we don't have the GIS layers for our water and sewer lines, and that's something that we would need to obtain ahead of time. And I don't think we have all that data, so that number could go up. Now, originally, the water and sewer and pavement were the things that staff had recommended, the things that we really saw as a benefit to us. The other things are great, but for us, making those decisions on water and sewer lines and streets is a little bit more difficult. Having that data to back us up would help us and help you make better decisions. So right now, all that we're recommending you do is move forward with just the data audit, which was the $9,100, and that's for water, sewer, and streets. And that'll tell us really what we need moving forward. And we really think that water and sewer and pavement will be the main modules we would use. And that's just our recommendation at this time. We wanted to get your thoughts on it, see if we wanted to move forward with that or not at all.
On adding the land component?
No, at this point, just moving forward with the data audit, which is the water and sewer and pavement. It's the proposal that's in there is the $9,100. And then also, yes, the land portion, if that's something that you still saw value in, even knowing that the cost goes up 4 times.
Just a question, since I know we're looking at doing some stormwater projects as part of this ARPA deal, do you feel like there's any value in doing like a one-time thing for the stormwater module?
The reason that we didn't recommend the stormwater is something that we can see usually, because it's visual. We can see when things are failing. Now, we did hear about one this morning from Hayden that was underground. No one even knew it was there. They uncovered it. But usually you can see your problems. And a lot of the problems with stormwater is it's just natural, it's just rain. It's God's gift to us, and we just deal with it best we can. Water runs downhill. But the water and sewer lines, those are things we can't see. It's hard to predict. That's where this modeling, I think, would be a little more useful to us. Now, the stormwater is only adding another $2,800 for the data audit. So it's not a lot of money if you wanted to still go ahead and do that data audit for stormwater and see what happens. And then as you can see moving forward, if we want to just add stormwater, it's adding $6,000 and $8,400 annually. So it's not a lot of money, but it was just something that we didn't think was as big a priority as the water and sewer and the streets. Those are harder to predict.
Considering that we're knocking out our top 10, I mean, does that factor into your decision or not? I mean, we don't need to model those, they're done.
Well, that is even more of a reason not to move forward with the stormwater portion for doing that projects. So I didn't know that at the time. This is development.
Can you go back and then add the stormwater in a year or two? Yeah. I think if I was using something new like this, I'd want to just kind of step into it and see how the first piece goes, and then make sure it works the way you expect, and you're not upset with all the things that occur.
And we did try to find other towns to talk to. They sent us a few towns, but the towns were either using maybe just one component. We're trendsetters. Yeah, we're the trailblazers, and that's what you do want to be. So I think more people will be calling us to find out how this works.
Yeah, I didn't get the impression that they had a whole long reference list when they presented it.
No, they didn't.
GIS is it's not a new field, but it's fairly new, and the things that we did. And being able to actually utilize it better it's evolving every day. That's really what this is.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, I kind of get the water and sewer. You can't see it. But right now, the way we're looking at our roads, I think Jerry has himself where he goes out with people and they do a grading of the road conditions. I mean, it's right there and you can see it. Do we need really to predict that? I mean, all you have to do is drive on a road and you know if it's suitable or not or needs to be repaved.
Well, part of it was the coordination with the water and the sewer, because they kind of can work hand in hand, knowing when to make those street cuts, when to not make those street cuts, and wait because of a project. The U.S. infrastructure study that Jerry that you're referencing, that's something that we would continue to do because that's part of the data that would go into this modeling.
But maybe we would skip paving a road 1 year if you knew we were going to take it out in a year and a half.
Yes.
And doesn't the modeling help predict, like, even before the road deteriorates, when it'll deteriorate?
It can, depending on, yes, the amount of traffic that's going on it. And this study doesn't do that. It just takes the snapshot of your current condition.
Because driving patterns change. So, I mean, it's only as good as the data, that snapshot at that point.
Right.
Well, that's what I think the annual maintenance, I imagine, is a refresh of the data model.
That's the annual
It's the whole thing.
Yeah, so you'd plug all that in.
Right.
And have their
with the water, sewer, and pavement, if
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, I like it. They did not have a lot of references, so there's no history, a proven history of it. So I mean, you try it for a while, and if it works, and if it doesn't, you go back to just whatever we're doing now.
Yeah. You know, I think part of the issue is such a new use of the technology that,
With
you know.
with the price tags, the water and sewer pavement projects, I'd be surprised if you could find that much savings with the state.
Definitely.
Well, I imagine part of it is that they're probably trying to build this business so that they're probably giving us a deal, I would imagine. Because there's no way you can pay a data scientist to do this for the prices
Usually I
that they're
always do
charging.
that, and they always work with me. They provided this handy dandy chart on one of your pages in there, this green chart. They base it on, they have population, it's one of the things they look at, miles of infrastructure. So there's really not much negotiating where they basically have it priced out for the community. Because of course, that's the first thing we always do, try to get it whittled down. But none of that. If you, and the more homes we approve, the more of this would cost.
I think it's good.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve,
The data audit,
data audit.
Yeah.
The water sewer.
payment.
I'll
Yeah,
second.
do I hear a second? Got a
Second.
second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries then. Very good. Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. So Mayor, that's all that we have for you for this workshop.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to a football game.
Well, I'm going to move to adjourn. Otherwise, you'll still be at the meeting while you go to the football game.
I'll second.
Got a motion to adjourn. Got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, let's get out of here.
You gonna change your jacket?